And it looks like we are live. Give me just a second, guys, as I pull in our Facebook groups, as we usually do here on the Mile High Huddle Podcast Network. Get the stream to breathe for a minute. Get everybody in here because our wonderful community on Facebook deserves to be in here in the conversation. Mile High, hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me as per usual is my good friend and colleague. And as you see on his screen underneath his name, he is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, much like last week, season of the lists, we've got projections coming out. We're going to break down from Mike Clay going into the defensive side of the football. It's the dog days of summer, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Really exhausted. I mean, yesterday was the little one's 6th birthday. So exhausted from that. But doing good. I'm been, just trying to figure out content to get out there for on milehighhuddle.com and just working on getting that out there, getting that all taken care of, already getting started on stuff for the 2024 NFL draft. Got a couple articles on that coming out soon. So nice. It's been busy, nose to the grindstone, trying to get things done, but I'm going to take a little break and, chat some Broncos football.
Yeah, it's going to be fun here. I'm going to get started on some of my draft stuff here over the next few days. I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts, kind of getting an idea of some names to kind of keep an eye on. Really listening to Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers over at PFF. They do a really good job. I really like their show. So I'm very intrigued by this class so far. Obviously, the quarterbacks, the big names, Caleb Williams from USC, guys like that. Drake May from North Carolina. There's a kid from Florida State. I can't remember his name right now. They ran through some running backs and some tight ends over the last couple of weeks. So looking forward to getting into some of that as well. So I'm really just kind of excited. It's the boring time of year, but you know what? It's never a bad time to talk Denver Broncos football. Let's say hello to everybody in the chat. First things first, we got a couple of super chats right off the top. Papa Bear, David McElrath jumping in off the top rope with a $20 super to get everything started. Thanks, Dave. We appreciate you, man. Saying good evening, Broncos country. Lance, Erick, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. No Scott as of yet. We have not been told if he's going to be here or not tonight. So hopefully he'll jump in here in just a little bit. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag Buckham 3 times. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate that 100%, man. We also have Troy Boer in the hizzy saying, here he is, with a $10 super chat. Hey, guys, do you think the reason we have not signed another interior defensive lineman is because the second-year players are really impressing? I want to just continue to say hello to everybody really fast before we jump into this, because this is a great kicking off point for our topic for tonight. We got Dylan Von Arks in the house, Todd Osendorf as well, Kevin Gray. What's going on, Kevin? How are we doing? Elliot is crazy. Ernie's in the house as well. Jason McKeever, Philip Hogginson. I believe I pronounced that name correctly. If I didn't, please let me know. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for your guys' support. Erick, let's get right into this here. Obviously, with Troy's super chat here asking, why have the Broncos not signed an interior defensive lineman? Is it because Matt Henningsen and Iyomo Wazirike are impressing at OTAs and minicamps thus far?
I mean, all OTAs and minicamp are is just it's installation. You're not running things full speed. There's next to no contact. Like, if they're impressing in any way, they're impressing with how they're picking up the defense and not with what they're doing on the field. So I don't think that's why they haven't done it. I think they have high hopes for them, and maybe there's a couple guys that they're looking at on the free agent market that are like, once we get into training camp and get to actually see these guys, actually get down and get dirty, that some of these free agents out there, some of these veterans that they're looking at, they'll still be available. And if they're not standing out, if they're not showing like the growth that they need to, then they'll go out there and look at getting another vet. So I just think it's a matter of the timing aspect of it more than anything. Just getting into training camp and actually getting to see what they can do on the field.
Yeah. The lack of content is obviously the big issue here. You're going 50%, maybe 75%, something like that. You're not going there. There's very little, if any, contact allowed, period. Like, you can barely even hardly touch each other out there. So it is hard to see, are these guys holding up well and like sustaining their gaps in the running game? Are they getting quality penetration as pass rushers and stuff like that? I do want to kind of elaborate on this, and I want to go first things first to Iyomo Wazirike. Last year he played okay. I mean, he showed some of that potential. The issues in the running game that we saw at Iowa State were definitely very prevalent with him, but he did get a couple of decent opportunities to get after the quarterback. So moving, like, let's just jump into these projections. Go ahead.
I would say, like, early on when we saw him in the season, like, because we got to see him like in the first few weeks. I know we saw him quite a bit against the Colts. I think we saw him against the Chargers there in the earlier game of the season against the Jets. Those games he really struggled, but when we got later in the season and he was being out on the field a little bit more consistently, we saw him kind of settle down and be a little bit more consistent and saw the flashes that made him such an intriguing draft prospect to me and why he made one of my favorites. But it's still one of those things that you got to still see him grow off of that as well. And then I think it was a season closer where he ended up hitting Justin Herbert, got a hit on Justin Herbert, picked up a couple more pressures on him as well, like really stood out as a pass rusher. But with interior defensive linemen, it's always worth remembering, especially guys who are making such a dramatic shift in what they did from college to the NFL. 2 to 3 years is typically what it takes. For Uwazurike, I mean, it's probably going to be closer to that 3-year mark because he's going from basically being a stand-up edge to being a actual interior defensive lineman.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. He did play a lot of that 5 technique, kind of standing up. He played some 3 technique as well, but they really didn't use him as an interior pass rusher. He did a lot of twists and stunts, moving around like end tackle twists and bringing some linebackers to help him and then peeling him back around the outside. So, which was really interesting for a guy his size. I mean, he's over 300 pounds, he's 6'4". I think he's got 35.5-inch arms. Like, he's super long. He's got a great skill set to go with him. But a guy that size that showed the ability to not only have the lower half fluidity and just the bend to be able to, he did show some bend coming around the edge at Iowa State. So to see him now have to, take on some double teams, he's obviously taking guards on, maybe he's taking some tackles on as well if he's playing that 4-eye technique. For him to have to work through that and really be an interior defensive lineman, it's a new role for him, and he's still going to have to learn how to play that role. There's also some opportunity for him as a pass rusher as a 0 technique. I mean, he showed a little bit of that at Iowa State as well. In fact, there was one specific rep against Iowa where he went up against Tyler Linderbaum, who was a first-round pick at the center position, and he did a push-pull technique, and he ragdolled a first-round pick, threw him aside, and went and got a sack on him. It was a beautiful, beautiful rep. So he has the ability to get there. He has the ability to become a high-quality pass rusher in the NFL. We just got to let him to continue to grow a little bit here. We've got Gary Palmer jumping in here before we jump into this. $20 super chat off the top rope. What's up, GLP? Thank you for joining us, man. Saying, hey, Lance, Eric, Scott, and Dylan, some Broncos country love. DB4L MHH for life. Buckham with a B. YouTube. Don't cancel me. I'm sorry. But thank you, Gary, for your support. Thank you all for joining us here on a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening. Now, let's jump right into this. Let's continue this Uwazurike conversation. Eric, you and I kind of went through these numbers. This is Mike Clay from ESPN. Similar to last week, we went through the offensive projections. We're going to go through the defensive side of the football this week. But Uyoma Uwazurike, Mike Clay has him at 271 snaps this season, 21 tackles, only 1 sack. This to me seems like a very low number for a guy. And I understand, I just said, you got to let him develop, got to let him grow, but you're really banking on him to be one of the guys as of right now. And is he capable of being a guy to get over, like where Mike Purcell is at, 488 snaps?
So my thing is like, he's only projecting him to play just a little over 100 more snaps this year. And with the Broncos' depth on the defensive line, I have a hard time seeing that. I have a hard time seeing Mike Purcell playing almost 500 snaps on this defensive line just because of how little they're probably going to use true 3-down or true 3-down man front. It's going to be a lot of 2 guys. It's going to be a lot of bear fronts. So I think that if we're not getting him on the field, if he is seeing, let me rephrase that. If he's not getting more than about 350 snaps on the field, it means he's not going to be something to me. Right. It means he's not impressing in practice. He's not doing enough. He's not showing up enough. Or what opportunities he got early on the season, he faltered and, he let it slip through his grasp and he's basically getting benched. I cannot see Uwazurike and Henningsen combining for less than 500 snaps. I 100%. I think combined they're going to push 600 snaps because they're the second year guys. You want to get them out there on the field, especially with Mike Purcell's age. and just his contract status. You want to see what you have in those guys. So I think that the snap count is a little low for them. And I think the sack count, I think about 1 sack for Matt Henningsen. That's fair. Like, he's not really a pass rusher. He's more of a run defender. Uwazurike is getting just 1.1. Like, with how they do their projections and everything, it's based off of career stats and everything like that. So a guy who's only played 165 snaps and doesn't have a sack, he's not going to get a lot of, be projected to get a lot of sacks. So that's some issues with these projections here. But overall on the defensive line, outside of the snap counts, I think that they're pretty on line with what I'm expecting out of them for the most part.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, especially when it comes to Mike Purcell. I mean, getting 488 snaps for a guy that plays specifically the 0 and 1 technique nose tackle in a defense that doesn't necessarily feature a guy like that more often than not. Like, getting him over 400 snaps seems a little bit wonky to me. And not to say that, Henningsen and Uwazurike can't play that, but they're more versatile. They can still play, outside as far as the 4-eye technique on the inside shade of the offensive tackle. So with Purcell and his limited skill set, and he's also not the best pass rusher, at least Henningsen, who he may not be the best pass rusher in the world either. He brings a lot of effort, and he just has those hustle plays. He's a quality run defender. He has the ability to get after the passer as well. Purcell is so limited in what he does. To get 488 snaps on this defense doesn't make sense to me. And Elliot is crazy jumped in here, and he says, and I'm going to be full disclosure here, I'm not exactly sure, but he asked, how does ESPN determine these projections? Seems like it's pretty complicated. It is pretty complicated. I know a part of it was past years, like, don't always equal future production, but you can get kind of an idea of what they're doing here. I think that Mike Clay bit off a little bit more that he could chew with this one, though.
I mean, he's done it every year for the past few years, and it's what he takes into consideration with it is, like, he takes age into consideration, injury history. He takes, previous production, and it's a whole formula that he has to try and project success for the next season. And sometimes he's pretty spot on with what he gets. Sometimes he's not. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is when you're doing projections like that, when you're taking so much information, because you can't project an injury. Like, knock on, well, actually, I won't even use a Broncos player for this. So you're trying to project Mac Jones' stats as a quarterback. Well, you can't project him with everything that he's done in his career already. You can't project him to go out there and tear his ACL in week 2.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And miss the season. Like, there's no projecting that. So there's a lot of variables into it. And that's something that Mike Clay, when he does talk about this, he often, like, reminds people who try to, dunk on him because he was so wrong in the preseason. It's like, well, the guy was coming off a torn ACL last year, barely played. So that's going to lower the projections a little bit because I can't project how well he's going to recover. It was kind of the conversation we were having a little bit last week with Javonte Williams and where we stand on him. It's kind of the same thing. So it takes in everything. It takes in advanced analytics from, like, Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders and all these things. And even, the advanced analytics that ESPN does. So it takes everything into consideration to go this out. It's a lot of information that you go out there, and it just creates for a fun discussion and a fun thing to look at. So going back to Mike Purcell, this would be his second highest snap total in a season. 488 behind last year, where DJ Jones missed multiple games, Draymond Jones missed multiple games, Deshaun Williams missed some time. Like, they were dealing with so many injuries on the defensive line and having to constantly rotate people out, where the guy who played the most snaps on the defensive line, well, that was Draymond Jones at 715, which we kind of see there. I mean, Zach Allen, that's taken that spot. Then we have Deshaun Williams and DJ Jones playing just about over 550, but not quite 600. So Mike Purcell, at his age, playing the second highest snap total after he just played his highest, is a little hard for me to see happening. And it will be only the third time that he's played more than 400 snaps in a season. Yeah. He has always been just a limited role piece in it. And that just goes back to the whole thing that I've been saying a lot. The Broncos need to add to the interior defensive line room, because if you're looking at Zach Allen, DJ Jones, and Mike Purcell being your top 3, well, then you're not doing enough to improve the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also means, like you said earlier, that if Wazirike doesn't get closer to 350 snaps this season, he's not showing enough. He's not going to turn into a guy that we think he could be as a quality interior pass rusher playing, that 3 technique, 4 technique, something like that. Like there's a problem there, and you got to get a lot better than that. Quickly to round out our Mike Purcell conversation before we jump over to Zach Allen here. Purcell is going into his 32-year-old season. According to this is spotrack.com, his cap hit is $3.786 million. Dead cap, $2.86 million. So if the Broncos did decide to move on from him sometime during the season, before the season started, and his salary did guarantee, they would save $3.5 million against the salary cap. So keep your eyes on that. Eric and I have brought that up multiple different times over the course of the offseason and even last season, that Mike Purcell is definitely a camp casualty, salary cap casualty kind of a player to watch out for, especially if they do go out and sign a guy. And Eric, I asked you this question earlier. I'll let you drop the name. Is there a defensive tackle out there on the board that's available that you would like to see the Broncos bring in?
I mean, there's multiple guys. I mean, and it just depends on what you want to do. For me, you're looking at replacing Deshaun Williams, who played 598 snaps last year, as basically one of your starting 3. Matt Ioannidis, he's done that role. He did that role in Washington, or he's done that role. Yeah, he did that role in Washington. He's done it in Carolina. He's played that exact role that they're looking for, and he's still available as a free agent. If you want to get a little cheaper with nose tackle, well, you got a couple undrafted free agents or cheap options on the roster already that can probably fill in and do it. Mm-hmm. And there are some veterans out there that can also step in and fill that role. So I don't think they'll part ways with Mike Purcell. I think even at his cost, he still brings value as a rotational defensive lineman, but not one of your top 3 guys. He's better as like that 4th or 5th guy that's coming in very obvious running situations, eating up space, eating up blockers, and letting your linebackers flow through the hole to get to the ball carrier. I think he still brings a lot of value in that, but just not much more than that at this time.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that he's going to see a lot of time in goal line situations and early in drives, specifically if teams are backed up inside of their own 35-yard line. Starting the game off, you're going to see Purcell out there, first and second down, stuff like that. And then obvious, like you said, running situations where goal line situations where he can just be that space eater. I got a question I want to grab here from Roy, but we're going to wait to do that. I want to jump into Zach Allen conversation here a little bit. This was one of the prize free agents that the Broncos brought in on the defense, obviously signing him to a big, 3 years and $65 million or something like. I can't remember exactly the contract, but it was the one big free agent signing that the Broncos brought in on the defensive line to replace Draymond Jones. Obviously, with his experience in Arizona, underneath Vance Joseph, was a player that the Broncos had their eye on to kind of, I think it's 3 years, $45 million, because it was $15 million APY. So, but with Zach Allen here, 813 snaps to lead the defensive line, 60 tackles as well, 6 total sacks. I believe he had 9.5 last season, so it's kind of a step back. But this, to me, needs to be more. Like you're going to go out and pay a guy $15 million on average per season. I want this to be more. Why do you think that Mike Clay has these numbers as low as they are in terms of the sack total?
Well, I mean, because his career numbers just aren't great. He hasn't really broken out. He didn't really break out as a pass rusher until last year.
Okay.
I mean, he dealt with multiple injuries early on. So, and then when you actually look at what he did last year when he broke out, 5.5 sacks.
Right.
He has 11.5 sacks in his 4-year career right now.
Right.
So it's just, this is what I always go back to is with the signing. He's a great run defender, but as a pass rusher, there just are issues being consistent enough. And real quick, just to be that guy, his contract's technically a 4-year deal, just the 4th year voids.
Right.
Well, which is a flawed argument. I hate void years. I think they're stupid and it's a way to work on it. But anyways, going back to Zach Allen. With what they paid him, I'm with you. You want more than 6 sacks. Period. You just want more.
Yeah, you want way more than that. You want to be closer to that 9-10 sack season if you can at least get there. Get him closer to double digits, especially as one of the primary. I'm not going to call him an edge defender because that's not really what he is. He's not a stand-up guy coming off the edge like that. But as a 4-eye technique, 5 technique kind of a player playing straight up over the tackle, you really want him to be a lot more effective than that. You want him to be able to impact the pocket, get around the edge, maybe even occupy some space, get some cleanup sacks and stuff like that for the edge defenders that we're going to get into here in just a couple of minutes. But I do want to grab this from Roy Osborne. And I know it's not necessarily Broncos related, but I do have an opinion on this. He says, "Good evening, Eric and Lance. What do you think about all the layoffs at ESPN? I wonder what is going on." This to me, like I said, it's not Broncos related. I just want to get my opinion out there on this. This to me screams just cost cutting. Obviously, if you guys know kind of what's going on, they signed Pat McAfee to do his radio show as like underneath the ESPN umbrella, and they are paying him a lot of money to do so. The layoffs that they got going on, people like Susie Kohlberg, Matt Hasselbeck, like Keyshawn Johnson, Jason Williams, Jeff Van Gundy, those are all like tertiary guys. Keyshawn had his radio show with Max Kellerman, and Max got laid off too. Those guys are like tertiary figures at ESPN. They're not really like the big moneymaker people. Susie Kohlberg works like 4 months out of the year, and it's during the NFL season. Jeff Van Gundy only calls games on ESPN. Like, he didn't have a major analyst role. This is just a cost-cutting deal. I don't think it's a huge deal, but they needed to open up some room to be able to pay Pat McAfee what they decided they were going to, because they want to use him and his podcast to bring in a new audience back to ESPN and just kind of start the station over again. So that's just my quick 1-2. Eric, do you have anything you want to say on that, or we pretty much covered it all?
They had plenty of money to keep him. Like, they didn't have to fire him, but they're going to label it as cost cutting. It's simple. It's just, it's business. Like, it's business.
Yeah.
Talking about the interior defensive line, Keith Brugman comes in. How big of a role do you see Tyler Lancaster having for the Broncos? Well, Tyler Lancaster is obviously not on the projections for from Mike Clay. And my question is, does he make the roster?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he does?
No, I don't. I think that he's got a better shot. Like, if he makes the roster, then something drastic happens. Somebody got hurt is my big thing. And he also showed out that he has the ability to play for this Broncos defense. I think he's going to have a hard time making the practice squad. Like, there's an opportunity better for him to be there, but I don't see him being a guy or an impact player unless massive onslaught of injuries comes across the defensive line.
He just, in his career, I mean, he's seen a lot of snaps. He's played over almost 1,500 snaps over 4 years. But it's always been as like that 5th or 6th guy on that rotation in Green Bay that got more snaps because of injury.
Yep.
Like, somebody got hurt, we're going to need you to use a little bit more. Instead of the 6th guy, now you're the 5th guy, or you're the 4th guy. That kind of thing. And as much issues as I have with the depth on this, I think that there's a chance he can make it. And the guy I'm looking at is Jonathan Harris.
Yep.
Like, that final spot to me is up for grabs at the moment. Who is that 6th interior defensive lineman? I have a gut feeling that they'll end up going a veteran route, getting somebody who's still a free agent to fill in that final spot. And then you're essentially seeing Matt Henningsen and Aoma Wazarike being that 5th and 6th guy right now. But if not, like, maybe Lancaster can fit in there. It's just unknown at the moment, because I think there's a pretty big gap between the top 5 interior defensive linemen and the rest. Like, there's a pretty big gap. We've seen Jonathan Harris on the field multiple times and absolutely just get blasted. Like,
yeah, he's a replacement level player, and Tyler Lancaster is much the same. Replacement level player. If he does make the roster, good for him. But I think that practice squad is probably the best bet for him to make this team moving forward. I think that probably, yeah, let's jump onto the outside here just a little bit, because this one's hard. This one actually kind of has me not really mad by any stretch of the imagination. Just kind of, do I want to go to the edge, Eric? Go back up to the edge.
I know. I'm trying to get my computer to cooperate, okay?
Gotta love technology. But so the big thing here that steps out with the Broncos edge defenders is obviously up at the very top of the list. You have veteran former Kansas City Chief, former Seattle Seahawk, Frank Clark, who was recently signed by the Broncos as the leading snap getter coming off the edge and the leading sack artist coming off the edge with 7 total sacks. This to me is, I don't want to necessarily say an issue, but problematic because, and I understand Baron Browning's coming off of a arthroscopic knee surgery. Randy Gregory's coming off a shoulder surgery. So you got injury concerns there. But Frank Clark is the leading snap getter coming off of the edge. Eric, what's your big takeaway on that?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he is.
Okay.
Like, and the biggest reason is he is the most reliable one to stay on the field.
It's a fair point. That is a fair point.
That's the biggest reason for it.
Yeah. It's shocking to me to see, the amount of investment they made in Randy Gregory, the amount of investment they made in Baron Browning to try to, move him from off-ball linebacker to edge. And he was more of a hybrid at Ohio State than that. But
the amount of effort and everything from the previous coaching staff.
That's a good point. You actually have a very good point there. But the big salary that you paid to Randy Gregory to not get him over 600 snaps, you're talking injury.
That the essential former GM handed out.
Yeah.
Sean Payton's the decision maker now. George Payton handed that contract out.
Right.
Well, now Sean Payton is the guy in charge. So, yeah, they handed Randy Gregory this big contract, and there was a discussion this year of, do we move on from Randy Gregory now?
Mm-hmm.
Because he got hurt and missed so much time. And then there was the whole attitude stuff on the sideline and the Rams game and in practice, the joint practices with the Dallas Cowboys. Like, he was an instigator. So there was a lot of, there was that internal discussion. Didn't make financial sense, but it does after this year. So with his injuries and everything like that, there's just so much going against Randy Gregory. And as much as big as his contract is, it's not guaranteeing him to be in Denver for beyond this year. And everything was done by essentially the previous regime.
Right. And I'm not going to disagree with anything that you just said. You're absolutely correct. Bringing up all big facts here. My thing is moving forward. This season is upon us, and we got to try to figure out what we're doing here at the edge position. And to see Randy Gregory play less than 600 snaps, you're either projecting him to get hurt again, suspended again, but you need to have that number way higher than that. That's a problem to me. And especially when you look down at the lower end of the roster here, Jonathan Cooper getting 217 snaps, that's about right. But Nick Bonitto only getting 184 snaps. If you have Baron Browning and Randy Gregory combining for less than 1,000 total snaps, actually my math is wrong, about 1,050 total snaps. That's a problem. I think that you need to get those guys more snaps. Frank Clark needs to be more of he's going to be like you said, he's going to be the guy that's going to be the most reliable option to be out there all of the time. But I need to see more from Randy Gregory and Baron Browning moving forward. Absolutely do.
They both got to show they can stay on the field.
That's true. You're right. Absolutely right.
If Randy Gregory can stay on the field, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up having the most snaps.
Mm-hmm.
But can he stay on the field? Baron Browning, he's the third guy. I would expect, if he can stay on the field, he's going to have a higher snap count. It's absolutely hilarious to me that Nick Bonitto is the lowest guy.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot another thing that Mike Clay, when we talk about this, he does ask around. He does try to get insight into what's going on. How do they feel about certain players? So having Nick Bonitto being the last guy at edge, having 184 snaps, does say something a little bit about what they're seeing with it. And it's the same thing with Matt Henningsen and Uwazurike too. I mean,
yep.
I just didn't mention that then and totally spaced it. But it's also, how little Nick Bonitto played also plays a factor into it.
Well, and how bad he was too. Let's be honest here. Nick Bonitto in his time on the field was not good. He got washed out in the running game constantly. The one big sack that he did have last season came on a very awkward-looking spin move against the Jacksonville Jaguars where he kind of crossed the face of the tackle, and the tackle overbit on the inside shoulder, and he kind of pirouetted very awkwardly and ended up in Trevor Lawrence's lap. It wasn't a great play by any stretch of the imagination. Nick Bonitto has a long ways to go. It's part of the reason why, and I don't want to speak for you, Eric, but I'll speak for myself. And based on my memory, you were not a big fan of Nick Bonitto at 64 last season either. This was a problem. He was one of the worst run defending edge defenders in the draft last season, just point blank period. He was awful. And you make him a second round pick. That was a problem for me. And he's got a long ways to go. He's got to develop better functional strength. He's got to develop better technique against the running game. There's a long ways. And to see 184 snaps, like you're on your way out after that, buddy. Like you better pick it up and figure it out, because that's unacceptable. Unacceptable from a top 64 player to get less than 200 snaps in a rotation that features. I know I'm going back on my words here, but you've got Randy Gregory and Baron Browning that are not going to play 600 snaps apiece, and you can't get Nick Bonitto on the field for more than 200 snaps. That's a big freaking problem.
And like, I didn't realize how much Nick Bonitto actually played last year. He played over 350 snaps last year. I didn't realize that it was that much. I was thinking it was like right around 200, just because his play was so forgettable. And I'm not trying to harp on the guy or anything like that. I wasn't a big fan of his run defense. His run defense has been absolutely atrocious since he's been with Denver. He's had a couple of those, nice plays, getting pressures on it. He had a good game against Indianapolis, but context here, every single pass rusher had a good game in that game for the Colts and the Broncos. Like, it was just a complete slop fest of offensive line play. And then he actually had a pretty good game against Kansas City the first time, I think, where he did a good job getting some good pressure on Patrick Mahomes. He just couldn't finish. And that was a big issue I had with him going back to Oklahoma. He had a decent number of sacks, or a good number of sacks, but there were so many missed opportunities because he just didn't have the strength or the size or the build to finish them, and he was able to get broken out. So going back on this, like, to all this, Frank Clark, if he's the top guy, then that's extremely telling for every single other edge you have.
Yep.
If things turn out like this, Randy Gregory isn't with the Broncos next year. Nick Bonitto's name is going to be all over in trade rumors. Jonathan Cooper, like, they're going to be looking at completely rebuilding this edge room, basically, because guess what? Frank Clark is also a free agent. So you got to see more out of all of these guys, with the exception of Frank Clark. Like, with what he's projected to get, that's about in line with what I'm expecting out of him for the type of player that he is.
Yeah.
You just got to get more out of everybody else. And like, with the number of sacks the Broncos have, like, overall, like, on this whole thing, it's what, 30, hold on real quick, I can zoom down. Too much. What?
40 sacks.
40 sacks. Yeah. 40 sacks. That is not good enough.
No,
that's not even in the top half. That's not even top 16. That's barely top 20.
You want to be closer to the 50 number. If you can eclipse the 50 number, you're in the top 12 in the NFL in terms of total sack numbers. I mean, what the Eagles, I think, were really close to an NFL record. They got like almost 70.
They got right on 70.
Yeah, right on 70. Yep. And like, that's huge. That's massive quarterback pressure. And that doesn't include all the times that they got after the quarterback and didn't get him down to the ground. I think they led the NFL in pressures too. So like that 40 total sacks. I wish he did do some pressures numbers here, because maybe that would balance out the numbers a little bit. You can't always project pressures, but at the same time, this is something, Eric, you and I always talked about. Pressure statistics are the greatest indicator of future pass rush success. So that is something that most teams need to be looking at. The higher your pressure numbers are, the more likely you are to be able to get home. If you're still around the quarterback, there's going to be opportunities for you to get home and get that quarterback down to the ground. So remember this, pressure numbers are the greatest future predictor for future pass rush success.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, like, and it's not necessarily that for future success. It's more so for sustained success.
Yes.
Players with high pressure counts tend to keep high pressure counts. Sack numbers fluctuate. I mean, you consistently have a few guys who are constantly in the top 10. Those guys are elite, but outside of that, it fluctuates a lot.
Yep.
And the philosophy is, and Bill Belichick's talked about this, Nick Saban's talked about it, and with college football, like, a lot of Mike Tomlin, a lot of great coaches have talked about this. It's because, like, if you're getting 10 sacks a game, but 25 pressures, you're only inflicting pressure on 25 plays.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're getting 50 pressures and 7 sacks, 35 plays on the first one. Sorry. That is 57. Like, there's a lot of teams out there that would take a higher pressure total, because guess what? A sack, that ends the play. A pressure, you're opening yourself up for even more. Yeah. And it's that whole, like, would you take a sack, or would you take what's in the box, or would you take the boat or what's in the box? You know, that old thing, the Family Guy meme. Like, it's kind of like that. And teams will rather take the box, basically, because that box could be an interception. That box could be an interception return for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
That box could be so much more. It could lead to a penalty against the offense, other than just a sack, where you lose some yards and they keep the ball. It's just the ability to open up and have that potentiality to get the ball for your own offense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's why a lot of teams look for pressure totals over sack totals.
Yeah. Before we jump up to the linebackers position, we want to grab this question here from Cristiano, who says, good evening. It's the first time he's been able to catch DVDD live in a while. Even though you're late, it's fine, Cristiano. We accept your apology and better be on time and more. What's that word? I can't remember. Anyways, regardless, thank you for joining us, man. He's asking, can Christopher Allen, last year undrafted free agent out of Alabama, can Christopher Allen be a dark horse to contribute at edge this season? And Eric, this is a question that I've seen kind of tossed around a lot. It's been over the last 3 or 4 weeks here on DVDD. And we also got to talk about Thomas Incoom, the undrafted rookie free agent for Central Michigan this last season, who I got a chance to watch some of his tape. Very developmental, a really good run defender, but he needs to develop a little bit more in the pass rush. But Christopher Allen is a guy that has twitch, has an injury history, which is probably why he went undrafted. Is this a guy that Nick Bonitto needs to look out for?
No. Nick Bonitto's going to make the roster. Like,
okay,
unless some team comes in with a trade that's basically giving Denver what the return on investment they gave up for him, they're not going to give up on Nick Bonitto after a year. Like, plain and simple. If they're going to, they would have traded him by now.
Okay.
But again, I mean, maybe some team, suffers a bad injury to their top guy, and they come in like, we'll give you a third and a fifth or whatever. Like, it's going to take something astronomical to get Nick Bonitto is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Chris Allen, he could be a dark horse. My thing is, I think they keep 6 edges. And this only has 5, so there's obviously that room for that last one.
Okay.
My thing is, my mouse is breaking on me. But anyways, so there's that room for that extra. For me, it currently goes to Thomas Incoom because he is proven on special teams. He's a proven run defender, and he's still developing as a pass rusher. And I think special teams and run defense is going to be the difference maker. Chris Allen, for me, he's played less than 100 snaps in college of football, between college and the NFL right now. Injuries, such a major thing why he's played so little. His top season, I mean, had a really good season in 2020 where he picked up 36 pressures on just under 600 snaps, getting six sacks in that time frame, but missed tackles 23.3%. Missed tackles. Like, he's just, pass rush ability is there, but run defense non-existent. And are you going to pair at the bottom of your depth chart and bring in yet another bad run defender, like with Nick Bonitto there?
Right.
With Randy Gregory there, who's not great. Like, he's an opportunist run defender, so he'll force fumbles and everything like that, but he'll also miss a decent amount. Baron Browning, who's decent, not great, still growing. Yes. Jonathan Cooper, who is inconsistent. Like, and you want to bring it like that, for me is why I go Thomas Incoom over Chris Allen, but Chris Allen definitely can have a part to play.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, especially when you come into just the run defense alone, because like you said, Jonathan Cooper, very inconsistent. Baron Browning, still growing, but very inconsistent. Randy Gregory's never been a good run defender, like, ever, and very inconsistent there. Frank Clark's good in run defense, but if you need a guy that you can throw out there for, I don't know, 10 snaps a game or so, something like that, just to be a true edge defender that can hold up in the running game, obvious running down situations. Incoom has the goods to be able to do that. I really liked what I saw. I watched 4 or 5 games of him from Central Michigan this last season, and I'm very intrigued. I think that there's some tools. I wish he had a little bit more bend than he does as a pass rusher, but I mean, there's room for bull rushers in the NFL, and he can definitely be a guy to step forward and just kind of take over the end of that edge defense. Keith Brugman jumping in here, give predictions for breakout player on defense this year. We'll do that at the end of the show. Eric, I have one in mind that I really want to kind of to point out. But let's move to the off-ball linebacker position. And this was another one. And Eric, you and I both kind of came to an agreement here. Josey Jewell being the leading snap taker at the off-ball linebacker position, also leading the team in tackles. Sacks I can understand, but leading the team in tackles when you have Alex Singleton, who was top 5 in tackles last season and snaps played at the linebacker position last season. That to me just doesn't add up, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Alex Singleton, he's going to be the guy at linebacker.
Me too.
So he's going to be the top guy. I think he's going to be easily have the most snaps. He's going to end up having the most tackles because the dude's just a tackle machine.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that could possibly go against that is his issues in coverage, and we saw it a lot last year.
Yeah,
maybe that pulls him down a little bit. And at least Josey Jewell's not great in coverage. Not saying he is. He is better than Alex Singleton though, and maybe that can be the difference there. But I don't think that it's going to be almost 300 snap difference if that is the case.
No.
But also on that note, I think Drew Sanders is going to pull more snaps from Josey Jewell than Alex Singleton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think overall we'll probably have 2 linebackers between about 700 and 850. And I think Drew Sanders is going to be closer to 500 or 400 snaps there. Just getting a little bit more because they absolutely love this guy. They want to get him out on the field right away. Actually, as we're talking about, Chase Wellner comes in. Do you guys feel differently on Singleton now versus time last year?
Yes.
I was wrong on my opinion on Singleton last year.
Likewise.
To me, he was just a special teams guy. Like, I did not like him on defense. He didn't scrape very well against the run. He was always consistently lost in coverage. And at least this last year, there were still issues in coverage. Like that, I still feel am pretty confident in that he's just not a great coverage linebacker. But he showed a lot better scraping against the runs, scraping laterally, sticking with it, and finding the open hole and doing that. He did a lot better than I thought he would as a run defender than what we saw with him previously with the Eagles. Not that it's so. Yeah, I definitely feel differently. I was wrong on my opinion on him last year with how low I was on him.
I'm actually going to second that. I thought that he was a little bit better in coverage than Eric did, but I was very wrong on him as a run defender. I thought that he was mainly a guy that was straight downhill, didn't scrape very well. And this was actually something that, Eric, I believe you and I were both correct on, and correct me if I'm wrong here. But when you watch Alex Singleton, especially out in coverage, the big issue that you have with him is while he may be a tackling machine, when you're out in open space and if he takes bad angles, which he does in coverage a lot, especially against running backs out in the flat, he misses a lot of tackles. There were, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 different times last season where he had missed tackles out in open space. And that is a problem. But he does such a good job of coming back and just coming back. He comes back to make that next play. He's always out there fighting. He's always out there grinding, and he just continues to fix and eliminate those mistakes as the game goes on. And down the stretch, when you need that big play to go out and secure a big tackle to eliminate that explosive play, the guy that's out there doing it is Alex Singleton. That dude's all over the football field. So I think, quite honestly, you're going to get Singleton and Jewell closer to about 800 snaps apiece. Drew Sanders about 350, somewhere around in there. And then my big question here is, let's go to Jonas Griffith, who I know that the last coaching regime was incredibly high on. And Keith's jumping back in here saying that I believe Jonas Griffith will have a larger role and more snaps than most expect, north of 400 snaps. Eric, I don't know that he's going to get 400 snaps, but to see him at lower than 200, and I understand. I mean, there's only so many certain plays that you can go around. Obviously, we're talking 2,168 total snaps is what Mike Clay has projected. So the math has to work out somewhere. This to me is interesting because this last coaching regime was very high on him, and he does have the athleticism to be a quality coverage player. He just was unfortunately hurt early in preseason last season with that dislocated elbow. So what do you think of Jonas Griffith and what kind of role and what kind of role is he going to have?
Well, I would like an apology from his brother because he dang near knocked me down in the San Francisco game. It was when Jonas Griffith got his interception. His brother was there, and he came creeping down and smacked me right in the back and about made me fall over onto the people in front of me, which wouldn't have been pleasant having me fall on somebody. Big guy. Anyways, I was a big fan of Jonas Griffith and entering last season. I was expecting a lot more, but injuries just derailed it. He got hurt in training camp, and then got hurt again earlier in the season, then got hurt again towards the middle of the season. Like, injuries just never let up. I don't think he's close enough to Jewell, Singleton, and Sanders to take a lot of snaps from them unless they get hurt. I think the only way he sees 400 snaps on defense is injuries. Knock on wood, because don't want anybody to get hurt. I think he's going to stick around. I mean, he's still a really good special teams player for a special teams unit that has to absolutely turn it around. So I think he's going to stick on this roster. I think there's a place for him. He's going to be a leader on special teams. I'm still intrigued by his upside on defense, but can he stay healthy? Can he grow? Can he grow without getting a lot of snaps, barring injury?
Yeah, that's the big thing. And like I said, he had the dislocated elbow. I believe it was in the very first preseason game last season. He had a knee injury and a hamstring injury, I believe, is what it was.
It was the first snap of the first game. Like,
that's right. That's that's absolutely, you were absolutely correct. And then Michael Ojemudia in the Buffalo Bills game, I think halfway through the first quarter, had the exact same injury happen to him. I believe it was a touchdown pass. If it wasn't a touchdown pass, the very next play was. They both dislocated their elbow back-to-back games, so like less than 5 days apart. So with Jonas Griffith, I'm with you. I think there's a quality role for him on special teams, so you're not going to see the higher number of tackle totals. But I think that I want to try to see him get closer to the 200 snaps, maybe take a little bit off of Drew Sanders' plate as they kind of, acclimate him to the NFL level, acclimate him to the NFL speed of the game and stuff like that. And also, we got to understand here, Drew Sanders, while he played very well at the off-ball linebacker position, he's done it before as a high schooler. He's only played one full season starting as an off-ball linebacker. So he still has just to learn the subtle nuances of the game. And doing that at the NFL level is not necessarily the best plan. At least Jonas Griffith does have that experience playing for multiple seasons in the NFL. So I think that he's going to eat into a little bit more snaps than 152, probably get him closer to the 200 range. But I mean, I'm very excited to see what Drew Sanders can do. I want more from Jonas Griffith. Cristiano jumping back in here. Can't forget the high-end resources, the free agency money and draft picks spent on Jewell, Singleton, and Sanders. That always matters. And that's absolutely correct. I mean, Drew Sanders was a third-round pick, number 67 overall. They made him a priority guy. They probably should have actually moved up. They're fortunate that he was able to fall to them. But they spent money on Josie Jewell a couple of seasons ago. He's on the last year of his deal. They just signed Alex Singleton to $6 million on an average annual value basis this last offseason. So there's a lot of money and a lot of high investment in this linebacker room. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jonas Griffith doesn't see a bigger role. I think that you need to rely on that veteran presence a little bit more.
And it doesn't matter the coach. It doesn't matter the general manager. They all care about the investment in the players. Yep. Now, with that said, if Josie Jewell goes out there and looks completely lost on the field, no, he's not going to be starting.
Yeah.
Like, there is to a certain degree, they care about it. Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, I mean, even greats from the past, like Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, every single coach cares about the investment because you want a positive return on your investment. And to get that, you got to get them out there on the field. You got to have them play. So yeah, it all matters. Like what the third round pick on Drew Sanders, the money spent on both Jewell and Singleton, it all matters. And that is why those are going to be the first three to get the shot. Now, if they don't grab it, well, that's a different issue. And we see it every single year. Every year. I mean, who's going to be the first? Who's going to be the guys to who's going to be the guys get the most shots at wide receiver? The guys with the most investment. And Keith Berman says, I think you guys don't take into account that Sean Payton picks the best players, regardless of how they got there. And that's just BS. Like, he does factor that in. He can say he doesn't all he wants. You can go back and you can look at what he has done with the Saints year after year after year. The people he's invested in get the opportunity first. Now, it doesn't mean that if they fail to grab it, he sticks with them. Mm-hmm. Like, no coach will do that. No coach will be like, oh, you're a first-round pick. Or you're not even first-round pick. First-round picks will probably get it. But, oh, you're a third-round pick and you're struggling in training camp. You're not getting it. We're not going to start you. Like, they'll do that. But that third-round pick is going to get the best opportunity over the undrafted free agent, over the cheap free agent they signed, over the cheap veteran. Like, it's just the way it is. It's the way the NFL is. You got to get that positive return on an investment, and got to get them out on the field to do that. It's all factored in.
Yep.
Now going on to the corners here. Patrick Surtain, it seems like he's projecting about 1,030 snaps on defense. Roughly, barring injury, Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, the top linebacker, they'll typically play close to about 95 to 100% snaps. Justin Simmons, especially if he is healthy. Patrick Surtain, especially as long as he stays on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that's about what he's going. And we're just going to cover the whole defensive backs in general, the whole secondary.
Wow, I didn't realize what time it was. Go ahead. Sorry.
I would like to see, Kareem Jackson's snap count. We talked about this before we went live.
Mm-hmm.
It's laughable. Like almost 1,000 snaps for the guy. If we see that, well, right off Caden Stearns, he's done. If Caden Stearns cannot beat out Kareem Jackson for the second starting spot, then he shouldn't be a starter in the NFL. Yep. Maybe he could be a number 3 guy, but Kareem Jackson, he showed last year, he is done. He's slow. He's late on his rotations. He was missing reads. He was late to trigger downhill. Like, just so many issues with him. So yeah, he's clearly lost his step. He's clearly on his way out of the NFL. Yeah, Caden Stearns entering his 3rd year. He's got to step in and do that. Yeah. That's my only issue really with the safeties is Kareem Jackson, Caden Stearns. You want that flipped. I know you have an issue with Justin Simmons and the interceptions. He averages 3.8 interceptions a season over his career. 3.2 is fine. Factoring out of the things, I do think he ends up with 4 interceptions. That's about where I have him. Mm-hmm. But again, hard to project, and using in previous seasons into it and age and everything, I can get why Mike Clay has him at 3.2.
Yeah. We've seen such growth out of Justin Simmons in terms of going and getting the football from his rookie season onward. Obviously, as players grow, they get better in terms of, finding opportunities and putting themselves in the right position. And while you and I agree, Justin Simmons does kind of luck his way into some interceptions, there are some times where he does make some spectacular plays, knowing where he needs to be and putting himself in that right position to go and make that play. My thing is, the last 4 seasons, Justin Simmons has had 4 interceptions, 5 interceptions, and then he led the NFL in interceptions last season, despite only playing in 12 total games. This defense, though, and this is where I kind of have the hang up and qualms. This defense is obviously very much different under Vance Joseph than it was under Vic Fangio, where you're playing a lot of zone, you get your eyes on a lot of footballs. This is going to be more man coverage stuff. You're going to see Pat Surtain locked up and Damari Mathis locked up one-on-one on the outside, a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3. Justin Simmons is going to be that single high safety for the majority of the time. And it's not quite his best skill set because while he's rangy, he's not a player that has that single high versatility to be able to range from sideline to sideline like an Ed Reed. So 3.2, the more that I think about it, it's probably about right. I think he does end up with 4 this season. But there's been people going out there saying Justin Simmons is going to lead the NFL in interceptions this year. And I don't think that that's possible at all. Like if he gets 5 or 6, I'll be very happy with that. I think 4 is probably about right for him. So as I think more about it, that kind of refines my take. Now, I'm not trying to come at you, Keith, and that's not what we're here to do. But dude, he jumps in here and he says this is before his comment on what was the last one we just pulled up? The best players regardless. Keith has to say, I hate to say it, but I think we see a step backwards for Patrick Surtain. He's been playing at such a high level. It only makes sense if he levels off or regresses at some point. Yeah, dog, that's not this year, man. We're going into a scheme that fits exactly what Pat Surtain likes to do, which is play in press man coverage and be in the hip pocket, be very physical at the point of attack, be very physical at the line of scrimmage, and then not really, I don't want to say be grabby, but have your hand in the hip pocket of the wide receiver. This defense is the prototypical defense for what Pat Surtain does at the NFL level. This is going to be a huge season for him. This, to me, I don't want to call him the breakout player because I got a different guy in mind, but this to me is going to be that season where everyone's like, all right, Pat Surtain, if he wasn't already top 3, he may be the best cornerback in the NFL, period. I understand where you're coming from to regress at some point. This is year 3 for him, dude. He's still growing as a player, and this is going to be the start of what you are going to see as one of the most dynamic cornerbacks in the NFL, period.
The question is, what cornerback lifespan is it going to follow? Is it going to be that short fuse that burns bright but fades quickly? Mm-hmm. Or is it going to be that long burning fuse that's not as bright, but still, just burns for longer? Mm-hmm. With what he has done in his career so far, he has made a lot of great plays, not trying to take that away from him whatsoever. Multiple great plays, but there are plenty of issues with his play, especially when it comes against the run. Mm-hmm. Well, when you have those issues against the run, you can typically find yourself being, seeing a little bit more longevity. I think we'll get another 3-4 years out of Patrick Surtain before we start to see him decline. He's definitely still on the upward slope, but quarterbacks, they hit that downward slope
very fast,
relatively early. Everybody talks about running backs in age 30. Corners are similar to that, and corners, it also factors in like how long you've been in the NFL. So he came in young, so we got some time with him still. Playing every single snap, obviously you want to do that. 1.7 interceptions, obviously you want more from him.
Yeah.
You want to see his number right there with Justin Simmons.
Yeah, 4, 5, 6.
Dude was a 9th overall pick. Like you want more interceptions out of him. He's had 6 interceptions the last 2 years. I think expecting 3 should be the minimum. Like for what he is. Damari Mathis, Quan Williams, they're about right where I have them. I would like to see Riley Moss, just completely eliminate Asang Bassi and Tremont Smith. Just take their snaps, fold them into Riley Moss.
Well, and if
Asang Bassi takes the field this year for the Broncos, something bad's going to happen because he's not good.
Well, didn't you know that he was top 10 in coverage grade according to Focus? No, I'm with you, and so is Mike Clay. Quite honestly, I'm going to get this question from Ants really fast here in just a second. But according to Mike Clay, he has Riley Moss playing 238 snaps. I think that's about right. 250 snaps. 250, 300 snaps, something like that from your third-round pick, a guy that you traded a future third-round pick to go up and get. He's obviously a priority for this Broncos defense. I actually do have an article up on him at milehighhuddle.com from last week. Speaking of, I'm going to plug this one. Marvin Mims and his projected role for this Broncos offense is up there as well. It went up last night, so make sure you guys go up to milehighhuddle.com and check that out. But Riley Moss essentially has Asang Bassi and Tremont Smith as obsolete players on this defense. Like Bassi's going to get in there for a handful of snaps. He got at 65, Tremont Smith at 22. I think Tremont Smith is a better option than Asang Bassi, so flip those numbers for me. And then Tremont Smith, you might actually see him get some opportunity as a punt returner this season alongside Marvin Mims, where Tremont Smith with the ball in his hands is an elite player. So give him a little bit more opportunity than Bassi. Make Bassi that kind of tail end of the roster guy. And if he does make this team, that's what he is, the tail end of the guy, special teams kind of a player. But I'm with you. I think Riley Moss is going to come in and have a huge role. GLP, Gary Palmer jumping back in for – we've got just a couple more minutes here before we have to get out of here. But GLP says, well said, Lance. He is so good and is just getting into a groove. Talking about Surtain. I think that PS2 is going to be, like I said, if he's not already top 3, he's going to cement himself there, if not the best cornerback in the NFL, because this scheme is just so perfect for what he does, for what his skill set is as a player. And Eric, you and I talked about this a while ago. I want to kind of expand on this conversation really fast. When we were watching Surtain and coming into the 2021 NFL draft, the big thing that you and I both were very questionable about is his change of direction ability and his footwork, specifically playing in off coverage. And while he didn't do that a whole lot under Ejiro Evero and Vic Fangio the last couple of seasons, he did still show that. But something that you pointed out to me, especially after his rookie season, was we misjudged his footwork. Do you want to elaborate on that just a little bit for us and what it means to translate into a press man coverage scheme?
So my biggest issue with him was the hips. They were extremely tight. They created hiccups when it came to flipping his hips, opening his hips, changing direction. I underestimated his ability to make up for that with his footwork. I always liked his footwork. His footwork was always clean. It was always good. And with what we saw in college, he just didn't use that footwork to make up for those issues. I mean, and he didn't have to do that a whole lot. And that seemed to have been a priority of Christian Parker and Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel as rookie season, to be like, okay, you're a little tight when it comes to changing directions. Use your footwork to make up for it. Just with like being a little bit quicker with your feet, positioning of your feet. So much can go into it to help cover up for the tightness of the hips when it comes to changing direction. So that was just the focus of him, and it's really paid off. I mean, his rookie season, were there hiccups? Yeah, there were hiccups. There were hiccups last year with his play, even in coverage. But he's still on that upward slope, as I was saying, and he's still improving his footwork and getting better with his footwork. His footwork by the end of last year was significantly better than where it was to start last year. And from where it was when he was in college. Like, he's just continuing to grow and everything. So that's just all it is. It's just, we always talk about having those tricks to make up for what you lack. Big thing for, edge rushers with shorter arms or offensive tackles with shorter arms. Do you have the tricks up your sleeve to make up for that area that you're lacking in? Can you, with offensive tackles, can you be quick enough to get and engage to where you are minimizing the impact of your shorter arms, even if they are, even if your arms are 32.5 inches and you're going against a guy who's 34, well, that inch and a half can be a significant difference when it comes to playing the game of football, especially, they're in the trenches. So just having those tricks and everything and using your footwork to cover up your issues with their hips, I mean, it's just the way to do it as a corner.
Yeah, that's really well said, and it's a really great breakdown. I'm glad you got to elaborate on that and kind of just help. I don't want to say that people don't know what we're talking about, but to break it down like that and make it easy to understand for everybody. It's a very, very good job, Eric. I do appreciate that. Last things last year. Thank you, GLP, for that. We appreciate you for jumping in and all your support, man. We really do appreciate that. What's up?
I'm sure we'll have some dissertations written in the YouTube chat, YouTube comments.
Yeah,
and they're ripping us apart.
It's never a good idea to start off a comment by saying that these guys are effing idiots. So let's not do that anymore, guys. Please, it was not very fun to read. But anyways, last things last, we do got to get out of here, but we do have the question from Keith Brugman earlier in the show. And shout out to Keith for joining us. And he does every single Friday. I wish we could get the opportunity to join him more on his show on Tuesdays. But he asked us earlier, who do you believe is the breakout player for this Broncos defense? Eric, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Asong Bossy.
Don't you dare. You can't. No, you cannot do that. You cannot do that.
Oh no, I don't really. I'm not sure I have one. I mean, I'd resort to Damari Mathis because he's the guy that. So DJ Jones has kind of broke out a little bit. Zach Allen's kind of broke out a little bit. Jewel, Singleton, Clark, Gregory, Simmons, Surtain, who's left? Damari Mathis. Mm-hmm. I don't think maybe a depth guy, but who? I think Wazarika and Henningsen, they're still going to take a little bit of time. Baron Browning, maybe, but how often and how consistent can he stay on the field? Mm-hmm. Quan Williams, he's good. We saw how good he was. We saw how significantly better the defense was when he was on the field compared to when he was off the field last year. So yeah, I'd have to say Damari Mathis because he's the only one that really fits everything to be that breakout player.
You picked the same guy I was going to say because Damari Mathis was one. I went back and forth with this because I'm going to throw the other name I had out there, but I want to talk about Damari Mathis. This dude, we all know 5 penalties against the Chargers in his first game after Ronald Darby went down with injury. And he just continued to grow and continue to get better, especially, I can't remember what game it was. I did a film breakdown about it. Go check it out, milehighhuddle.com. But I broke down his tape. In fact, we got Luke Polglaze, our good buddy, the coach from Juniata College, joined in on a conversation with me, talking about, hey, it's a good piece. And I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. And he actually showed me some more tips and tricks. He's like, you're absolutely correct on, this kid's playing a lot better, And so that was the one that I really wanted to point out with just the growth that we saw from him over the course of the tail end of last season, and just being a lot more consistent up to until that Chargers game where he had a horrible game. But regardless, the guy that I'm going to shout out here is one that we didn't get to see a whole lot last season because he was hurt. It had, I believe it was a knee issue. Caden Stearns, man. I was very impressed with him as a rookie at the safety position. You're going to see him as the starting safety. I know Mike Clay has Kareem Jackson over 900 snaps this season, but that's just not going to happen. And if it does happen, then Caden Stearns didn't break out. But this dude has everything you want. He is a great athlete. He's a great tackler. He reads his keys relatively well. He's a smart kid. Like I said, incredible athlete, 9.09, I believe, RAS score at Texas. This dude can do it all. He can play in the slot. He can play in the box. He can play single high if you need him to. He works better in two high safety looks, but he at least has enough range and athleticism to go after and get the football. I think Caden Stearns is the guy you really need to watch out for on this defense. If he can stay healthy, he can be a player that is going to really revolutionize this Broncos secondary and just take it to that next level. Last things last year, though, we got Michael Ronquillo jumping in here late at the bell. Mike, dude, why are you late, dog? Why are you late? You're supposed to be the first one.
He was in here earlier.
Oh, I didn't. I missed the comment. I do apologize. I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding. It's always great to have you in here and great for your. We're definitely grateful and appreciative of your support. It jumps in at the last minute saying, "Great show tonight, Lance and Eric on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos and buck 'em." He also jumps in and says, "Broncos country, enjoy your weekend." And that's where we're going to sign off here, man. As Michael says, enjoy your weekend, everybody. Thank you all for joining us on Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can find us on Twitter by following me at LanceS_MHH, for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, guys, while you are at it, please make sure you guys are following at Mile High Huddle. That's the main mother account where you guys find breaking news and analysis regarding your Denver Broncos, film breakdowns, opinion articles, just pretty much anything Broncos related. You're going to find it at Mile High Huddle. Facebook supporters, make sure you go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. It's a great way to keep the conversation going, join in with everybody, and just have a good time. It's a great community we have over there on Facebook, and we want everybody to join in on that and just kind of, continue the conversation and have fun with us. Folks, if you're not willing and able to do so in terms of super chats, going to the merch store, buying products and stuff like that, times are rough. We understand. It's not a big deal, but everybody should be doing these three things down at the bottom of your screen. And if you're listening after the fact on the Mile High Huddle podcast page on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you get you guys podcasts, subscribe, please, to Mile High Huddle. It helps out a lot. Like every single video and article you guys see across all social media platforms. And if you love it, you love the content, what we're doing here, make sure you share it out in front of as many Broncos fans as possible, because without your guys' support, we could not do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. Now, with that, Eric, I always have to ask you this before we get out of here. Any last words, man?
Yeah, if we miss any stars from Facebook, I want to apologize. We didn't have Scott here with us tonight to yell at us not to miss you guys. And we can't see them on the stream. So we apologize if we missed any of that. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate everybody who donates, everybody who supports Mile High Huddle. And I hope we get to see a lot of you guys at the meet and greet for the Green Bay Packers game, October 22nd. Yeah. I'll be there. Lance will be there. Nick will be there. Chad, Zach, Scott.
Carl's going to be there too, from what I understand. Like pretty much the entire podcast host, everybody's going to be there, from what I understand. So make sure you guys are there and in attendance. Even if you don't get to go to the game, at least come down to the parking lot, come and hang out before the game, say hi, have a lot of fun. We do a whole big tailgate. It's always a blast.
Well, I'll be buying I'm going to be getting a ticket for Lance and I and my brother who's going. So if you guys impress me enough, I'll happily give you Lance or my brother's ticket.
You can have mine, damn it. I'll just go down to the bar and have a beer. A pop. We'll have a pop and just have a great time regardless. I can't wait to see everybody there. Also, guys, last thing here. I know I said last things last like 4 or 5 different times, but still, last thing here. You all please do stay safe this weekend. Obviously, it's 4th of July weekend. Everybody's going to be traveling. Have a safe and happy 4th of July. Please do not drink and drive. Make sure you guys take care of yourselves. Keep all your digits, all your fingers and toes, and keep yourselves out of jail. Please stay safe and take care. Eric, anything else?
No, have a good weekend. Enjoy the 4th of July. Be safe.
All righty, guys. You all stay safe and take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. Happy 4th of July. And as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys same time, same place next week.